Foundation. Today we are looking at data-driven decisions in leadership, and I've got a special panel of guests. I'm joined by Dr. Bernard Tembo, PhD, a research fellow. Welcome, Bernard.
Thank you very much, Fabi. I'm delighted to be part of the webinar today and just to share my thoughts on a couple of things around data.
Awesome. We also have Dr. Mwemba Mungo, DBA, a strategic management consultant. Welcome, Mungo.
Webster, thank you. I'm delighted to be part of this program. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I must commend the foundation for this very good initiative. Thank you so much.
All right. Then we have Professor Felix Kalaba, PhD. He's a professor of environment and development. He's also the Dean School of Natural Resources at Copperbelt University. Professor, welcome.
Thank you so much, Webster. It's a joy to be with you and indeed to be invited to this very important forum.
All right, so I'm the only one who is not carrying the title of a doctor here. So the next time I should have a doctorate. Others invite you. I need to work hard. Yeah. All right. So this is a high-profile meeting featuring doctors. So we're looking at data-driven decision making in leadership. So I'll just give an overview of our discussion today, and then we'll dive into it. So the ability to make decisions is the hallmark of a leader. But according to a leadership expert, Larina Case, author of The Confident Leader, the ability to make consistent, exceptional is the hallmark of a great leader. Now, data-driven decision-making, which is abbreviated DDM, is a process of making organizational decisions based on actual data or evidence rather than intuition or observation alone. According to a survey published by the Harvard Business Review Journal, 1,300 senior executives found that 81% of the executives agree that data skills are required to become a senior leader in their companies. Further, according to some studies, the importance of data in decision-making lies in consistency and actual growth. It enables companies to create new business opportunities, generate more revenue, predict future trends, optimize current operational efforts, and produce actionable insights. So when a company employs a data-driven approach, it means it makes strategic decisions based on data analysis and interpretation. A data-driven approach enables companies to examine and organize their data with the goal of better serving their customers and consumers. Research suggests that the use of data is an actionable way in becoming more paramount in a competitive landscape. So having given that background and as a way of maybe settling down, I'd like to start with you. I'll start with Bernard. Dr. Tembo, you have done a research. Are you able to share with us, just to give us an overview of the research which you have done and the significance of your research? And before you come in, I'd just like to inform those who are following us, please let us know that you are following, ask your question, tag a friend, invite someone. We are live on Presson Foundation Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. Dr. Tembo.
Okay, so, well, every day I live, it's an issue of looking at data. Of course, data in different formats. Some of it comes in form of text. Some of it comes in form of numbers. A more or a huge study that I did around data had to do with my PhD, where I looked at how mining firms in Zambia make decisions, strategic investment decisions. So there we looked at financial data, we looked at economic data, we looked at energy data, we looked at mining data. And of course, the data was of different size. And yeah, so basically it was, how do you process data to inform strategic decisions? Not just a decision, but a strategic one. And yeah, and in short, that's a research I can say I did that was huge. Though in my day-to-day work and in my consultancy, I pretty much do things around data.
Awesome. So you're a research fellow. Maybe before
Yes.
we look at that, I mean, what's the significance of your study to this nation?
Okay, so there's always this debate around whenever there's a proposal to increase electricity price, right? You hear mining companies and other firms say it's going to make us less profitable and the like. So we wanted to test that hypothesis, or wanted to test that argument and say, in a mining environment, what is important or what drives this strategic decision making? Is it a price of electricity, or is it a tariff? Others would call it a tariff, or it's other things. Then after we did the study, we did a lot of modeling and we did a lot of analysis. We found that the copper price is actually more of a stronger predictor than a price of electricity in Zambia. And we also, from the numbers, it actually shows that electricity is not as volatile in Zambia compared to fuels, for example. But you never hear mining companies, for example, complain about the price of fuel. They always try to complain around the price of electricity. So the significance there is that it kind of helps the government to position themselves when they're negotiating with the mining companies, not to be swayed by mere sentiments. Yeah, that's a huge finding, by the way.
Yeah, all right. Interesting. I had a look at your study, and very interesting findings there. I think it can be a detailed story for another day. And the fact that you were able to project the future of the mining sector, was it 50 years from now or something like that? Based on
up to 2050. Up to 2050.
Up to 2050. All right. So useful information there.
Yeah.
Let me come to Mwemba Mungo, Dr. Mwemba Mungo. You have a DBA. Are you able to tell us what your study was about and its significance to us here, particularly in Zambia?
All right. Thank you, Webster. So my focus of research is on strategic management. So the study that I did for my DBA was on basically studying the use of strategic management practices in the public sector in Zambia. So we basically got data that helped us understand how the public sector in Zambia is currently using strategic management practices. And in terms of the significance, basically we were able to come up with frame and specific recommendations on what the public sector in Zambia should do to improve the use of strategic management principles in the way we conduct our business. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, let me come to Professor. The last time we met in Johannesburg, you were still a doctor. I didn't actually know that you were a professor until a few days ago. What does it take to be a professor? And maybe you can give us a highlight of your PhD study that you did and its significance.
Okay, thank you so much, Webster. So what does it take? It's actually a lot of research, publication, and indeed ensuring that one is recognized, and slowly they get to the level of being an authority within their field. Now, these are some of the terms that are quite scary to say that I'm slowly getting to be an authority. So maybe briefly talking about my PhD. In my PhD, I looked at carbon storage in trees and trying to see how this changes in the recovery trajectory. So what it is that when, for example, trees are cut down, we all know that trees grow back. Now, at what rate? How does carbon change at different stages? And then how can we then use this information to influence and inform our forest management practices? The other thing that I also did within my PhD was to try and deal with textual data. Dr. Tembo did mention about data coming as text. So in textual data, where you look at policies, there's a high rate of deforestation and forest degradation. But what do the other policies say? For example, the agriculture policy, the wildlife policy, energy policy, and what is the interaction, coherency, and how they impact on another sector. So that's what I did. But now, obviously, I've moved on. Apart from that, looking at other things. For example, I'm looking more on adaptation to climate change, even at the global level. What are the observed impacts? What are the projected impacts? And then how then can we adapt to climate change? So this information is feeding into the global policy on adapting to climate change. So within that, obviously, the Zambian perspective coming out, but I write for the African continent.
Awesome. So I believe policymakers are able to use the works that you're doing to as a basis of making decisions, especially at policy level. All right, interesting. I had to check on what you studied so that you can demonstrate or be able to give highlights on what you studied. All right, so having looked at what you did, guys, I know you have done great work. And so we come back to our topic. What have we have heard about data-driven decisions in leadership. So maybe for starters, what does this mean to you? We can start with Dr. Mungo. What does this mean to you?
Okay. Thank you so much, Webster. When I first came across this term of data-driven decisions in leadership, I looked at the three key concepts that are in that whole concept. There's the concept of leadership on one end, there's the concept of decision making, then on the other end there's the concept of data. So you make decisions about where you want to be tomorrow, and decisions on what you need to do to get to where you want to be tomorrow. Now, you also look at the concept of decision making itself. What is decision making? It's all about making choices. What is data? Data is information. So looking at this whole concept, what it means to me is a leader or leadership basically which bases its decisions on data and not basically intuition and gut feeling. So before you make any decision as a leader, you tend to think through what the basis of that decision is going to be. So what data am I basing my decision on? So I think in brief, that's what is
all right. So you're bringing out some interesting dimensions of intuition and gut feeling and whatnot. So we'll be able to look at that. But maybe Dr. Tembo, based on what Dr. Mungo has said, how would you say is the importance of data-driven decisions? Why is data-driven decision making important in leadership? Maybe Professor Kalaba, you can maybe come in on that.
Okay, thank you so much. So picking up from where Dr. Mungo left, allow me to start by quoting the Holy Book. In Luke 14:28, does ask the question to say, for which one of you desiring to build a tower does not first of all sit down and count the cost? So in counting the cost, that's actually collecting data, and then that data will actually help you to make a decision. So with data-driven decision-making leadership, we are saying that we are not just making decisions based on how you are feeling, but you are looking at what is on the ground. What is the reality? They always say figures do not lie, but obviously within data research, we look at figures, not only figures, but also how those figures were collected. So that at the end of the day, you look at this and then make decisions. Now, if you have to make decisions based on data, I had one of very interesting discussion from, I think that was back in Kigali, where this entrepreneur had 2 workers and had to lay off one because of financial difficulties. And then she started analyzing them. One of them was hardworking, was able to bring business, but the issues of trust were not that much because he was a guy who could actually get away with maybe a few dollars. Then the other gentleman was trustworthy and was very helpful, but was not. He was not a guy who would actually make a lot of money. So this person had to make a decision. So when I look at these two, which of these should I lay off? Now, based on the data that this person had and then the interest in growing the business, she had to lay off the guy who was trustworthy, but whose output was less, and looked at the guy whose trust was a bit questionable, but was a hard worker and was able to bring business. So why am I bringing this example? The example is just telling us that, you know, when you're making decision, it's not just abrupt, it's not about the feelings, it's not about how people look, but rather you are looking at a certain pattern within their work and then make a decision based on that. So in data-driven research, for me, it's critical because we want to make decisions that are informed by facts. And these are the decisions that are able to actually stand for a test of time. And these are decisions that one is able to defend. Because if it's not based on data, there's no basis for any defense.
Yeah. All right. I like the practical approach that you have brought out. I think in my introduction, I did mention that data-driven decisions ensures that there is consistency and continual growth. So, Dr. Tembo, still on the significance of data-driven decision making, would you like to add something on that?
Sure. Let me insist that you call me Bernard.
Bernard.
Or a bit more passionately, BT. Yes, or even BT. I insist. Okay, so
if he insists, all right, Bernard seemed to have disappeared. I'm sure he'll be joining shortly. Should be connectivity. All right, so Bernard wants to be addressed as BT. I remember my wife when she was studying. I think one of the professors, her professors, used to insist that address me as professor because I worked hard to earn this title. So I must. After I heard that, I needed to make sure that when I'm addressing someone who has done a PhD, I really have to. When I'm addressing someone who has done a PhD, unless they insist like the way Bernard has insisted. Welcome back, Bernard. So,
sure.
Yes, please, you can drive home your point.
Sure. I must apologize. I don't know why I keep dropping off. But anyway, so the whole idea of using data to make decisions is an issue of promoting accountability. I mean, you can't audit something that does not have any guideline, right? So if you, like, for example, the example that Professor Kalwa gave on the decision of who to lay off, if you ask that person why you did this, they're going to tell you these are the numbers. So for me, when I'm thinking of data, it's an issue of it's a system that one uses to create accountability, or to create a system that can easily be audited, to create a system that can easily be trusted. Because if you just make decisions using your judgment, just out of the blues, or you just make decisions based on gut feeling, it kind of affects the issue of trust. it undermines the issue of creating systems. But if there are systems, it kind of forces you to think around data, to think about why you are making those decisions. So for me, when I think of data analysis, it's an issue of being accountable. It's an issue of being transparent. It's an issue of promoting systems thinking and enhancing institutional systems.
Awesome. Now, some of the benefits of data-driven decision-making include it leads to greater transparency, as Bernard has said, transparency and accountability, continuous improvement. It ties business decisions to analytics insights. It provides a clear feedback for market research. It enhances consistency, as I mentioned. It also leads to satisfaction, to the satisfaction of the employees. It improves efficiency and improved productivity. So, having outlined these benefits, let me start with Mungo. All right, I'll address everyone with their first names because Bernard has insisted. I always get confused with the surname for Mwemba and Mungo. Please bear with me. How do you want to be addressed?
Mwemba is fine, my first name.
All right. I don't know why these titles, some of us who are not yet doctors, we really look forward to being called doctors. But here you are, after attaining this status, then you don't want to be addressed as. All right. Back to our discussion. Mwemba, what's your take? Which benefit would you like to maybe highlight?
All right. Thank you so much, Webster. The benefit that really speaks to me regarding the use of data in decision making vis-a-vis leadership is the one that speaks to satisfaction. I know in your preamble you've tied it to employee satisfaction, if I got you right. But you see, this applies even to the broader perspective. When you make decisions based on data, you are more likely to provide a solution that meets actual needs. There's a joke that normally goes around regarding politicians saying they will promise you a bridge where there's no living. There's no, you know what I mean? When decisions are based on data, you are more likely to make decisions that are going to address the actual needs that are there. I'll give you a very good example of someone who perhaps runs a shop. You see, if you're going to base your decision on data about what customers want, you ask customers, they give you their views. You're likely to make decisions that are perhaps going to acknowledge the fact that customers want more of this type of suits than the other type of suit. But you're going to base it on intuition, on your own gut feeling. You might bring in red suits when customers actually want blue suits. So data-based decision making is useful in helping us make decisions that address the needs that are real and the needs that are actually there. Let me give others a chance to.
All right. Felix, you want to highlight one or some benefit on the same?
Yeah, sure. Looking at issues of addressing real challenges, not only real challenges, but also improving efficiency. Now, again, getting an example of politicians. I love politicians because if there was a species that in biodiversity wouldn't really mind losing, it's actually politicians, because they're interesting. If a politician goes to a constituency, they'll come out and say, the people want this. And another politician from another political party will also come and say, no, the people want this. And the third person said, the people want this. And then you're asking the question, so which people are they referring to? Because it's like what they want are totally different. Now, the simple reason for that is because there is no proper data that shows the actual needs as well as what needs to be improved. So, for example, if you're talking of improving efficiency, we need to appreciate why are things working out in a certain way. For example, you collect data on electricity, like consumption. And I don't know now if I was to go to our maybe Zesco and a few others, if we can have data to show daily consumption and see how this changes, or how this changes maybe from one season to the other. So that at the end of the day, when you bring in an intervention will, like Mwemba mentioned, be addressing a real issue. We have a challenge whereby sometimes resources can be poured into a project, and trainings can be poured into an organization, and these may not actually be helpful. Why? Because they're not addressing the issue on the ground. So for me, data-driven decisions, one of the benefits I really consider is actually increasing efficiency. Because remember, resources are limited. Money is limited. Time is limited. And who wants to waste their resources? So it is important that we are efficient in how we use our resources, even in leadership.
All right, you've touched on a point which I really don't want to go that path, but it's interesting to note how our friends in the political circles, how they say the Zambians are saying this. No, the Zambians are this is what Zambians are saying. So you hear 5 different things, all referring to Zambians. But at the moment, I don't want us to go that route. Please, those who are following us, please bring your questions. David is watching. Kondwan Izyambo is watching. Francis Tanganyika, Michelo Milambo, Jenny is watching. Ian Dixon, Francis Ketis Lloyd is saying, tested, deep stuff. Francis has posed the question. We'll be addressing the question soon. Memory Chipulu is tuned in. Sam Chiteta is also tuned in. So please do let us know how you're finding this discussion, and most importantly, bring your questions so that the gentleman I have these today, it's a rare opportunity to put these 3 doctors in one place. They are ready to address any question that you may pose regarding the subject of discussion today. Now, listen to this. Let's look at data sources. I think you've already touched on that. Studies show that there is 2.5 quintillion bytes of data that is produced by humans every day. So in terms of research, according to the US Census Bureau, about 13.1% of US adults had a master's or doctorate as at 2019, an increase from 8.6% in 2000. So in absolute numbers, since 2000, the number of people age 25 and over whose highest degree was a master's degree has doubled to 21 million. So the number of doctorates, doctoral degree holders has more than doubled to 4.5 million. So the studies are generating very useful data. So as I mentioned earlier, that you see, there's a study which I'm doing, and which is along the same lines as Mwemba. And you agree with me, both Bernard and Felix, that when you're doing your research here in Zambia, when you look at available studies, researches that have been done in Zambia, even compared to the countries in the region like Zimbabwe or East Africa, Kenya, you find that there are not so many studies compared in comparative terms. All right? So now, why are data sources so important? Or let's say, is research really important? And why are we doing enough as a country in terms of investing in research? Who goes first? Bernard,
Let me go first. Yeah. So there are many issues around data, right? So there's this component which people say data is not there. And and they try to justify everything. Then there's this other component. When data is too much, they don't know what to do with it. I'll give you an example of say you are working for anti-corruption. You are a data analyst in anti-corruption. Now I'm saying this. I don't know if they sponsor you, but I think it's free advice that I can share and maybe people out there can use. You want to change the strategic messaging around corruption in Zambia, right? So so you go to Facebook or you go to social media. If you are like me, you can easily code up. You can write a program. You mine all the data or much of the data from social media. Then you simply extract those components which say anything about corruption. If you do that, you find that whenever corruption is mentioned and it has a politician's name, everyone is excited and they talk about it. But when there is corruption that has nothing to do with the politician, seemingly citizens are not interested, right? So then you realize that the issue of corruption, whenever people think of corruption, they only get excited when it's a particular type of a group of people, which is not healthy as an anti-corruption commission. So what you want is to end corruption, regardless of who is performing it, right? So when you're designing a messaging around corruption, you have to think of where do you get the data and how can you go about to change the perception of people. So in this case, it's free advice. You can find that data on social media. Zambians tend to be concerned about corruption when it involves a politician, but not concerned with corruption when it involves a person like me or a person like you. So you kind of saying, then what is the problem? But then the other problem comes in when you say, do people actually have the right skills to be able to analyze that data? So you find someone would say, well, there's no data around corruption that we can use to design a strategic communication strategy on corruption or ending corruption among the common citizens. But if we just with a few training, maybe I'm just undermining everything. Maybe with a bit of a master's, a bit of a mathematics background or a computer science background, you can be able to get the data that you want from social media. Mwebantu, for example, you can find that data on Zambia reports, on just in different platforms, and you can be able to analyze and strategize around that. So the issue of data sources at times is hampered because of the skills that people have or the skills that people do not have.
Awesome. Any additions?
Yeah, I think just adding to that, there are two things. When you have data, we need to look at the quality of data.
Yeah.
Is the quality okay or not okay? So obviously, when it comes to the quality of data, this has to do with a bit more of, depending on the research, some will require maybe a level of funding and have a structured way of collecting this data and get a lot of information. So yes, we have gaps in there. But the biggest challenge that I've also found is that data is important, but what is even more important is how you interpret the data. How you interpret the data matters. For example, I remember one time chatting to a colleague. This was years before COVID, and I went to a hospital. So this person was telling me that there was an increase in the BIDs, in the numbers of BIDs. Then I asked the question, why is this the case? Do you know the response? The response was, I don't know. We don't have funds to do a research to establish why we are having these problems. But meanwhile, this person had a ream of paper and the information when people were bringing in their loved ones, they would collect data. Like, for example, the person who's died is this age. Were they killed by someone? Or were they maybe in hospital, discharged, and then they died from home? So the biggest problem we have is that actually having analytical mind that asks questions. And Webster must mention that the problem we have in our nation and as Africans that we are trained not to think. The moment you ask a question, then you don't have respect for the elderly, and you are a problem. Now this catches up with us later on when you have to make decisions, because from simple things. There are a lot of things that we get from my social economic data research. You find that you ask these questions to people that are maybe male and female, people who are maybe of a certain education background. How they answer their questions, you can actually draw a line and say, okay, maybe this information, I think people who have gone up to grade 7 seem to know this better than the other. This gender is, understand this thing this way, or is impacted in this way by climate change and all these things. So I think the biggest challenge you have is interpreting the data. And we also need to invest in interpreting the data in decision making.
All right, awesome. So, Mungo, as you come in,
okay.
Mwemba, you also address this question. Is it necessary to have a chief data officer in an organization? Or
okay,
you can pick it from there.
Thank you, Webster. As I address that question, maybe let me start from where my two colleagues have left it from. I like what Bernard did mention regarding the fact that data is everywhere. I think there's no question on the abundance of data in Zambia or anywhere. One of the things I did discover in my research is that actually there's a lot of data around. But the issue is with ourselves, our attitudes. Most of us will only do research when it's going to justify the award of a qualification on you. Without that, we don't seem to have motivation to do research. But I think this is an attitude that we need to change. Research should not be limited or be tied to the award of a qualification by CBU or UNZA, but research should be something that should be integral to our business operations and our decision-making processes. So there's no question about the availability of data. There's plenty data out there. The importance of data sources. You see, the quality of your data source has a big bearing on the quality of the data that you will collect. And for me, therein lies the importance of the sources of data. If I have a wrong source of data, I'm going to get wrong data, and I'm going to make wrong decisions. So it's very important that as a leader who is a decision maker, I ensure that I identify the right sources of data. Is it important to have a data? You're calling me data officer?
Someone who just looks at data. You can call them a chief data officer, or someone who just specializes in data analysis and whatever title he may be given, they might be given.
Thank you so much. It's very important to have such an officer in an organization for purposes of being able to collect the data and help develop skills around the analysis of that data. But much as it is important to have such an officer in an organization, I believe that this is a culture that should be developed in every manager. Because you see, the tendency of having an officer dedicated to doing something, he'll be collecting the data, but no one will be using the data. So we should find a way of making as much as we're going to have a chief data officer, let's find a way of making every manager a data officer. That way they're going to use the data that is being collected in an organization. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, so you've brought out the element of developing a culture, a data-driven decision-making culture. Now, there's one model that outlines some 4 steps in terms of inculcating or developing a data-driven making culture. These 4 steps are to set up a foundation that allows your company to collect and analyze data. The second step is to make sure that your culture is comfortable with data. Then number 3, remember that data is a story. I think there's this what is called digital footprints, which you leave. The one moment you go to a certain site, then all of a sudden you start getting links leading you to similar sites. So those are digital footprints. Anyway, the data experts here will be able to speak to that. And then the final stage is analyze the data, but don't forget to trust your gut. I want us to zero in on this one. Don't forget your gut. Where is the balance between data and gut or intuition? At what point does intuition come in?
Okay.
Bernard,
do I let Prof to go?
No, you can go. Then
So gut has its place, particularly in situations where you can't quantify something. You know, there are certain things that how many people went to Mandahue, for example, or how many people went to UTH, for example, that you can quantify. But there are certain decisions that you have to make that not quite represent that you want to consider. So for you to make a gut decision, it needs some level of experience. It means some level of knowledge. It's not just something that you dream up. It has a mental model that you have, or you say, you know, I've seen this before, but I've seen this before. And using your experience, your knowledge, then you can actually decide, okay, let's do this and not this. For quantitative, for analytic issues, those are things that you have the data, how many people are there, what do you need to do? People decided to buy this product and not this other product. So for those things that you have numbers, hard numbers, you can easily go ahead and use quantitative or analytic solutions. But for gut, it's for those things that are quite difficult to quantify, and you have the experience, like you worked in a certain field, and you can kind of have a good judgment. But those two are not separate.
Yeah, maybe I can also add to that. Gut, using your gut should be for those who legitimately should have the gut. What do I mean? What I mean is that, you know, there's this issue of saying opinions. Opinions are not for everyone. They're only for those who have the right or the legitimacy of an opinion. So if you're an expert in a field, you've done things over and over and you've seen results, you are in a position to actually have a gut and say, I think I'll do this. But if you are a fresh graduate or you have very little experience and you start just thinking of this is what I feel or think. So it has a lot to do with the experience and how certain things have worked in the past. I'll give you another practical example from one of the studies done, where you have an organization, they go to an area, then they calculate the distance women were traveling to go to the river. And they were walking 10 kilometers a day to go and fetch water. So that is data. So they use that data and use that data to sink boreholes so as to reduce the time that cover to fetch water. And after sinking the boreholes, to their surprise, women continued walking to the river to go and fetch water. And then they said, why is this the case? Little did they know that going to the river was also at a social component. Women would be away from their watching eyes of husband, they would sing, they would wash their clothes, and just be by themselves, and they're free. So meaning that it's not just about water, but it's also about other things. So this is why when you have experience, you have like the third eye as you look at things. But again, when you're using your gut, it's not that you throw away your data. You have your data, but you look at your data, you look at the trends, and sometimes you ask, okay, maybe these trends may have been influenced by this component at this time. So I think this is the reason. So these two should be looked at, I think, simultaneously.
All right. Awesome. I love the way you have just explained this whole thing about gut feeling or intuition. Now let's look at the dangers. What are the dangers of following tradition and not data? There's this notion to say, no, this is the way things have been done. This is how we do things here. And, such practices may not be backed with data, or over time things could have evolved. But then here is a situation where people want to continue doing same stuff. So, Dr. Mungu, are you able to pick it from there? What are the dangers in such an approach?
Thank you, Webster. I like the illustration you've just given regarding doing things just because this is the way we've been doing them. Now, especially in the current context, that's a very dangerous practice. We are living in an environment where the business environment, speaking of it from the business point of view, is very volatile. Customer needs are changing so fast. So you cannot assume that the same things that satisfied customers yesterday satisfy them today. So the biggest danger in not following data is that you are very likely to miss the goalpost. You are likely to make decisions that are going to cost the organization a lot of money, and just to discover that these decisions are not meeting the needs of the customers. So I think that's the biggest danger in not following data. The other two dangers relate to issues to do with conflict. Decisions that are made based on gut feeling are normally subjective. And they are the reasons why we have so much conflict in organizations. I really don't see why people should make noise over a decision that is made based on an objective basis. Meaning everyone is able to say, you made this decision because more people are buying blue suits compared to red suits. It's an objective decision, there's no question about it. But if you're going to make decisions based on intuition, like I've already said, decisions will be subjective, and there's going to be a lot of conflict. So let me just stick to those dangers for now. You miss the goalpost, spend money, discover this actually is not the solution to the problem at hand. A lot of conflict based on the subjectivity of the decisions made in the absence of data.
So there's a lot of subjectivity. So data-driven decision making brings in the element of objectivity. Now, in Africa, decisions made by leaders are generally not questioned. It's a cultural issue. Is this a dangerous approach? And is this culture evolving? I think this is a continuation of where Mwemba has left it. Bernard.
Well, it's actually not just at leadership level, right? You find, for example, us who are close to academia, people rarely, even within academia, they rarely challenge each other in Zambia. And it's a really deep problem because it stifles innovation, it stifles good ideas, because you're afraid, like Felix said, if you question something, it's taken like a rebel, right? So you just let and flow with whatever is there. Instead of like through questioning, it kind of opens up to different possibilities. If I question why you are doing that, you may actually think of it differently because you may need to justify it. Maybe you started doing something because you wanted to do it for maybe some personal reason. But if I ask you, you kind of start thinking, what is a rational decision that I can, what's a rational reason that I can give? Then as you give that reason, you start thinking of other possibilities of how to enhance that decision and make it more objective and better for everyone to understand. So it's not just the leadership issue, but I think it's something to do with culture, or it's something to do with social norms that people kind of fear to question why things are done in a certain way and why things also should change.
Awesome. All right, let me get to the questions which are coming through. Francis Tanganyika, how can you hire or recruit a data-driven leader? Then let me go to Kondwani Ziambo. Data-driven decision-making is key and important for growth in any organization or society. How can we help the young generation to get into research, bearing in mind the view that Zambians don't read? Those two questions. Felix, you want to come in first?
Yeah, sure. Maybe the first one, as you look at hiring a leader that oversees data-driven, one of the important things to do, I think, is when you're looking at the hiring process, the whole hiring process, all the whole interviews. I know I've had the privilege of sitting in on several interviewing panels. At that level, you need to actually change, I think, the way questions are asked or framed, so that at the end of the day, you are able to read, what is it that drives this individual, And I think during the process of hiring, I think you need to be very, very deliberate. And it's not that you're only going to ask one question, but I think through the whole process and also looking at their background. Then, when it comes to the young people in Zambia, the youth and generally Zambians, I'm not shy to say that a Zambian, if you are to offer them on 100% truth on one hand and 50% truth with 50% lies on the other, and you even tell them that this is the situation, choose, an average Zambian will go for the 50% truth and 50% lie, because average Zambians, they want some mystery somewhere. But we need to have
do you have data to prove that, Professor? Do you have?
Yes.
Or it's based on your intuition?
On the guts, on the intuition and gut. Yeah. So I think for the young people, and generally I think for the citizens of our great nation, I think we need, when you talk of data, like data is everywhere. Data is not just in reading. As you read, you get data. As you observe, you get data. As you breathe, you get data. So I think what is important is to encourage people to be observant and to be asking questions. Why do we have electricity? Because someone asked, why am I in the dark? And can something be done? Why do we fly? Because someone asked, why is it that we cannot go to other places? We're taking ages to get there. So I think what we need to do is that we need to encourage even young people to start asking questions, so that as they start asking questions, then that will become the very basis of collecting data and making decisions that are based on data. Now, I'm sure, I know this can raise a lot of issues with young people, more especially young single people. A long time ago, when they used to arrange marriages, that was data-driven leadership. So they'll go to this family and then they say, oh, this guy is hardworking. I think there are these challenges. And then at the end of the day, they'll come with their data-driven. So if you are from a family of drunkards, chances that you get a girl from another family will be slim. Why? Because that was data-driven research. So even now, you find that you use data-driven, you get to know someone, and that's data-driven. So I think for me, our whole lives need to be based on reality, which is data.
All right. Awesome. All right. We are soon coming to the end of the program. So let me pick out some few other questions. Tombinzile Chimba. Professor, I was about to say experience helps as well. All right. David Nkoma says, if you just got promoted and you want to make data-driven decisions, how do you do it when you are so young? Okay, take note of that. Then Michelo Milambo says, you mentioned there is a lot of information available to everyone. How can one get data that could be restricted to the public? For example, economic trends and information about the capital market. So take note of that. Then since you always speak of making it on a large scale, what about at a small scale? How can you help promote think tanks at a national level? Maybe Mwemba, you can pick one question, Bernard picks one, and then we wind up.
Thank you so much, Webster. Maybe let me start with Tanganyika. Tanganyika, it's great to know you are tuned in. Tanganyika is my workmate. Hiring a leader who is data-driven, just to add to what the professor has mentioned there, also has to do with what you communicate to the market as the kind of person that you want. I've seen companies that give a very detailed profile of the kind of person that they want. I think that is very helpful in ensuring that you get the right people to submit their applications for you to be able to get the right people you want. There's a question to do with being promoted. And how do you promote data-driven decision when you're just young and stuff like that? I want to assume our colleague is imagining a situation where you're in an organization where your superiors don't appreciate data-driven decision making. I believe in showing people the benefit of things. And one of the things you can do to help build that culture within your organization is by helping your superiors see the value that is in data-driven decision making. So make good decisions, show them the data upon which you based it, demonstrate that your decisions which are based on data actually are more beneficial than decisions which are not based on data. And I'm sure that any reasonable person, once they see that benefit, will certainly be able to buy into the concept that you're trying to introduce in your organization. So I think the short of it is show the benefits of it, demonstrate that this thing works. And slowly, without you even talking about it, to say this is data-driven, slowly people will jump in and start following your way of doing things. That should be able to help you. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. BT, any addition? And the other question from David?
Yeah, let me take the issue of access to data. Capital market data is actually available, except that maybe it's not available in an easy-to-use format. So LUCE publishes numbers every day, every day of the week of how capital markets are doing. BOS, for example, gives you statistics on the exchange rate. Every day you can download that in Excel, but maybe people do not just know the right places to go to and stuff. So data is available, but if you want data outside Zambia, you can look at World Bank data, UN data. I mean, you find a lot of databases there, but at times the issue is just knowing exactly where to go to get that data. But in terms of data being available, data is available. But the other thing that helps is just training yourself to handle different formats of data. So you might be familiar with handling data in a CSV file or in an Excel file. Then data comes in form of a web page. How do you get data from a web page? So those are some of the skills that eventually you might need to look at to start developing if you want to get into data analytics.
All right. Maybe one more question from Tommy Nzile Chimba. Why is the knowledge gap too wide in Zambia in terms of accessing data? Has the education system helped since we have people who so not have accurate information about everything? I don't know if you have got that, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much. So question is why is there like this huge knowledge gap? And then the last part of the question was maybe website can just help me, because the first part is that why is there a knowledge gap?
So why is there, I'll read that again. Why is the knowledge gap too wide in Zambia in terms of accessing data? Has the education system helped since we have people who who do not have accurate information about almost everything?
Okay.
So there's the issue of the education system. I think that's the context.
Yeah, that's very true. So one of the challenges, I think, is that the education system, I think, is not actually pushing people to look for data. You find that in some cases, the education system, even starting from maybe primary through tertiary education, we're not really maybe pushing people to look for data, but rather maybe to recall data. So that's why the gap is there. Then the other reason why the gap is there is that there's very little research going on about a number of things. And because of that, people, like Bernard mentioned, is that they don't actually know what to look for and where. For example, if you were to look at CSO, Central Statistics Office, you look at the population, the census report. The census report has data, a lot of data. And sometimes in organizations we have a challenge whereby nowadays data that is actually collected using public funds is supposed to be open access. But you find that some of this data is sitting in government departments or some departments, and then the person who sits on that data on paper is supposed to share that data, but is not sharing the data. So once you know the data that you need, I think there are channels that we can actually use and get this information. Yeah.
Awesome. Gentlemen, this has been very...
Sorry, Webster. There was a question on think tanks.
There
was a question on think tanks. Let me quickly answer it. So the best way to help local think tanks is just to enhance training, because local think tanks play a very critical role in advising government or just different institutions. They feed into the policy process. So if local think tanks have better skills when it comes to data, not just running a regression, but just thinking around data, how to use data, that would be the quickest way of helping local think tanks at national level.
Awesome. All right. So in conclusion, okay, let me read out this. Leaders exemplary leaders' exemplary behavior can also include modeling the desired attitude about data and analytics in meetings. Leaders should frequently ask, do you have data to support that point? And encourage others to do likewise. Just that simple approach really can go a long way in terms of changing the culture. Someone is coming to you with a decision or with a suggestion, you ask them, do you have data to support that decision or argument you are making? So maybe as we conclude, what would be your tips that can improve the data-driven decision-making for leaders in the corporate world, in government, in across strata? What would be your tips that leaders can take away from this discussion? We start. Who goes first?
I can
All
go
right,
first.
let me go first.
Oh, okay. Then Member will go first. Yes, Member.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Thanks. I think just a few things that I'd love people to go away with. I think one big question that could be going out there in the minds of people is, but how do we actualize this whole thing? What is involved and stuff like that? And allow me to share just these few points to make this come to life. To be able to implement a data-driven way of doing things, one, be clear about what you want to achieve. So what is your mission? And what exactly do you want to achieve? Number two, identify the type of data that you need to help you achieve what you want to achieve. Number three, be clear about where you can find this data. So where do I want to go? What do I want to achieve? What kind of data do I need to help me get there? Number three, where do I get this data? Once you know where to get this data, then go ahead and collect the data, analyze it. It shouldn't end there. Normally we collect this data, put it in a shelf, forget about it. Once you've analyzed this data, apply it to decision making. And to wind it all up, like Webster said, it all lies in culture. In all these 4 steps that I've described, if you don't have the right culture, a culture that promotes the use of data in decision making, all this is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to take you anywhere. Let's think of these steps, but let's also find ways and means of developing a culture that appreciates data and uses data in making and implementing decisions. Thank you so much, Webster, for this opportunity.
Awesome. Professor.
Yeah. Yes. I think the takeaway is that organizations need to set goals. And once they set goals, they need to look at how they are going to measure progress as they make progress towards these goals. Recently, we had an interesting discussion where we are within climate change. There's this talk saying we need to urgently act, urgently respond, urgently. But now within the IPCC, we are defining agency. What is agency? How do I know that you are urgently acting? How do we measure agency? So that at the end of the day, don't just make abrupt decisions. I've sat in meetings and in boards. One of the things that you find is that people will make and get away with sweeping statements that don't mean a thing. Why? Because there's no data to actually measure. So I think, like in your conclusion website, you did mention that when decisions are being made, it is extremely important that we look at data, so that whatever decision someone is saying, it should be backed by data. So if someone is agreeing, they must give reasons why they're agreeing and give you data. If they are disagreeing, they must give reasons why they're disagreeing and provide data, so that you avoid passengers. There are people who are just passengers. They will be dozing throughout the meeting and they'll just say, oh, yes, I agree. Yeah, but the question, what are you agreeing to and what data do you have? So I think that is extremely important. So I think that's maybe my big takeaway.
Awesome. BT.
Okay, mine very short. as for me, it's at personal level. At personal level, develop a sense of accountability. Just that, like anything that you do, just try to be accountable, whether to your children, to your spouse, or to your colleagues at work. Just develop that accountability, a sense of accountability. And then secondly, learn to ask right questions. It's not just any question that you ask that would give you the right answers. But if you invest your time and thought in asking right questions, that would help you make better and sound decisions. Thank you very much, Webster.
All right, there you go. Ask right questions. And there's a key suggestion here as a takeaway. This one says data-driven arranged marriages. I think that came from someone. I actually didn't know that those were data-driven. I mean, data-driven marriages. So that's my key takeaway. I'll try to maybe get more information about that. Maybe get the data sources from Professor. But that was an interesting point. All right, so this has been Presson Leadership Forum brought to you by the Presson Foundation. And this has been your host, Webster Twambo Jr., the chairperson of the Presson Foundation. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page. This video is going to remain on our page. That's Facebook Presson Foundation page, as well as our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. So to my special guests, the doctors, thank you so much for making it.
Thank you, Webster. Have a great evening.
Thanks for the opportunity. Sure.
All right, most welcome. All right, so until next time, thank you so much. Press on.